Welcome to episode 31 of the Frazley Report. Today is Friday, March 23rd, 2018. I do not know what news has been going on in Azeroth this past week. I am coming to you live through my gnomish communicator. I have been on the go investigating a lead all week. Last Friday, after recording the Frazley Report episode 30, I was eating a meal at the Blue Recluse. My friend Tom, proprietor of that fine establishment and sexiest voice on their podcast, came up to me. I just happened to have a microphone recording, as all people who are investigative journalists seem to walk around recording everything.
Frazley, my gnome. I was thinking the other day about how we haven't seen Mr. Smite since before Cataclysm. Can you investigate this, please? I was actually making him a birthday cake for Vanilla Dungeon Appreciation Day. Oh, how I loved how he killed me in vanilla, and my party would laugh at me. Oh, the shame.
I remembered Mr. Smite. I had fought him when I was a wee lad in vanilla. I had not realized since the Cataclysm that he was missing. This got me intrigued. A missing person story. Something that hasn't been discussed. This is just as big as the fact people forget that ogres in vanilla didn't have fully enclosed loincloths. Many gnomes still shudder at the sight, as they had to fight ogres from behind during fights to avoid their attacks. With this, I finished my delicious meal at the Blue Recluse Tavern and set off for a flight to Westfall. Once I arrived in Sentinel Hill, I started looking around for clues. I asked the local innkeeper if she had any clues. She informed me that Mr. Smite would occasionally come to the hill. He would often be drunk and very rude to anyone that came near. He was always trying to evade authorities, but he actually would routinely pay her to have supplies for his crew shipped in from Stormwind. She wasn't one to turn away some coin. She talked about how times have always been tough for Westfall residents. She raged on about how Stormwind has never been overly supportive of the populace. She said many of the residents feel that King Anduin still treats them as second-class citizens, that he doesn't care about them as much as he cares about the citizens of Stormwind and Elwyn Forest. She went into a long political rant, and I got distracted from the conversation. Instead, I started watching a butterfly out the window. It was very colorful, with red and gold stripes. What a wonderful butterfly. When she was done rambling hatred at my King Anduin, she alerted me back to attention. I apologized for drifting off. She scolded me for wasting her time. She told me she had not seen Mr. Smite since the Cataclysm. I asked her whether she knew if Mr. Smite had any relatives still alive. She told me that there was actually a relative of Mr. Smite that lived in Westfall, a cousin of Mr. Smite, who lived in a home not too far away from the inn. They were a Tauren named Madame Bovid. I thanked her for the information and hoofed it over to their house. I was glad to be away from these very mean verbal attacks against the greatest king we've had since Varian. May the light rest his soul. Once I arrived, I could tell that this individual lived off of very good fortune. Their yard was very lush, full of green grass, gorgeous flowers. They even had a bunch of workers watering the fields and working on the yard. I went up to the door and knocked. After a few minutes, and many locks being unlocked, the door opened to reveal a woman who had to be in her late 60s. She asked me why I was there. I told her that I was here regarding Mr. Smite. She shrieked.
Is he dead? That boy I knew one day he'd get into an utterly ridiculous mess.
No. I actually am trying to figure out what happened to him, man.
Oh, whew. My cows almost gave out into shock. Come on in, dearie.
She welcomed me into her spacious home. It was bigger on the inside. We sat down in 2 leather chairs, which surprised me as they looked like cow leather, but I didn't question it. She told me about how Mr. Smite grew up as her younger cousin. She was about 15 when he was born.
He was such an innocent little kid until he changed into his teen years. Started hanging around with some bad people. He had aspirations all through his childhood to be something more. He felt like there was more to life than just what he knew. As he got older, he left this ideal. He had joined a gang of pirates, and we grew apart.
This was fascinating. Mr. Smite had grown up as a sweet kid, believing in something bigger than himself. Then he joined forces with Van Cleef's gang, a story all too similar to ones I have sadly heard before. I asked Madame Bovid if Mr. Smite had any friends that were not part of the pirates.
No, dearie. Mr. Smite didn't wear depends.
No, I said friends, not depends.
Oh, yeah. So my sweet child. He had a goblin friend named Kizgak. Those two were inseparable until Kizgak's family moved to Howling Fjord in Northrend. After this, Mr. Smite would keep in contact with Kizgak through a goblin communication device. It exploded 4 times a week, but Kizgak hadn't shown him how to fix it, even after Kizgak left. And while Mr. Smite was joining the pirate gang, they kept in contact using the device.
I thanked Madame Bovid for her time. I had a lead on someone who kept in contact with Mr. Smite. Our story was moving in a good direction. I dashed over to the Howling Fjord to meet Kizgak. I landed in Valgard in the Howling Fjord. Once there, I went to the inn to inquire about Kizgak and his family. Lo and behold, the bartender turned out to be Kizgak himself. His family had hit hard times. His mother had passed on the boat from Minethal Harbor to the Howling Fjord due to sickness on the long journey. Once here, his father was killed when Vrykul attacked the settlement one day. Kizgak was taken under the wing of the former innkeeper. We sat down in the empty inn to discuss what he knew about Mr. Smite.
Yeah, Mr. Smite? Why are we calling him Mr. Smite, by the way?
I don't know. Everyone has just called him that.
His name is Anguston, but his friends called him Angus. Oh, yeah. I see why we're calling him Mr. Smite. Anyway, Mr. Smite was my best friend. We'd been through so much together.
After you moved here, did you keep in contact?
Yeah, buddy. We kept in contact. The communication lessened sometimes, for a bit. It was very sporadic. For months. Once it felt like a year before he contacted me. And then one day, I get this call from Mr. Smite. He had this energy that he had been missing.
Kizgak pauses at this moment, thinking about the call.
He told me Kizzy. That's the name Mr. Smite called me. I never gave him a nickname. I don't like to do that hullabaloo stuff. But he said, hey, Kizzy, I've done with the pirate life. And you know those rumors about lands in between Kalamador and the Eastern Kingdoms? Yeah, I'm going to go sailing. See if I can find a new place to go.
Mr. Smite had a change of heart? This was something I never expected of a dungeon boss. After that, have you heard from him again?
Yeah, years later. He messaged me on the device I made for him. Told me he found a land of pandas. I thought he was crazy. He said, no, these also don't look like a panda from the, World of Warcraft Vanilla Collector's Edition. These are ginormous, some very fat pandas. He told me that he found his true calling. He joined a movement called the Order of the Way of the Orderly Way of the Order of the Way or Orderly Way or something. And he thanked me for being my friend and all the friendship. And he told me he had to forego all communication to achieve his calling. I never heard from Mr. Smite after that.
That must be Pandaria. Thank you for your time, Kizgak.
Anytime, bub.
I went to Pandaria in search of this movement. You wouldn't believe how many movements there are in Pandaria. Finally, one of the bartenders at the Vale of Eternal Blossoms knew exactly where this movement was located. Right before we went live for this broadcast, I just made it to the monastery in Pandaria. We are about to see if Mr. Smite is alive. I am about to enter the monastery that Kizgak mentioned. Okay, I am walking through the front gates right now. I don't see him. Oh, no! I see him! I see Mr. Smite! Okay, I don't want to disturb Mr. Smite, as he looks so serene in his duties. But he looks happy. He looks at peace finally. He found his purpose. Well, this just goes to show you, even dungeon bosses can have a change of heart. We finally discovered what happened to Mr. Smite. Now you know the rest of a story no one ever really thought of for an NPC that got removed in a WoW expansion until Tom mentioned it once on an episode of The Blue Recluse, then told me in Facebook Messenger when I asked him for ideas for a script for this show. This has been the Frazley Report. I am Frazley Sparkspan. You can find the show at frazleyreport.com. Until next week, be awesome. Oh, I can't wait to get home. I think I'll pick up a cheeseburger. The Frazley Report is a fan podcast that covers Blizzard games. We are not affiliated with Blizzard Entertainment, Inc. Views expressed by the host and guests are their own. Some of the art, music, and sound effects come from Blizzard games and are owned by Blizzard Entertainment, Inc. No copyright infringement is intended.
Want more awesomeness every week? Visit weeklyawesome.com. Weekly podcasts to make your week better. Remember to smile and be awesome.